or one of my favorites anyway. So the temporal bone, remember, has these different parts. There's the squamous part, and the squamous part includes this area here on the side wall of the cranium. Okay? And it also includes this prong that sticks out, that's the back of the zygomatic arch. So those are the squamous part of the temporal. Where am I? Petrous portion. The petrous is the hard, rocky part of the temporal, and you can't see it from the outside of the skull. You have to look on the inside of the skull. And so here's the squamous part of the temporal. We're going to flip that around, and on the inside, you see this area in here. This is the petrous part of the temporal. And this is the ossified otic capsule. So it corresponds to the prootic and opisthotic bones of other amniotes. All right. So squamous portion, petrous portion. The tympanic portion is the part. Let's see if it shows it better. Yeah, it's probably better on this one. It's the part that surrounds the external auditory meatus. So if you look at the external meatus, you can see this rim of bone right around it, and that's the tympanic part of the temporal bone. And this actually evolutionarily comes from the angular of the lower jaw. So when those middle ear bones moved into the middle ear, the back end of the lower jaw was what was actually holding the tympanic membrane, kind of came off with them and fused onto the skull. And then the last part of it that you can see is very big and obvious. That's the so-called endotympanic part, and that's what makes the bulla. So this is the endotympanic part. Okay. Oh, I did not bring my little plastic block with the middle ear bones, but did everyone see those? They're cool. Okay. And a lot of the skulls, particularly on those disarticulated skulls, you can see the ear bone still sitting inside of the middle ear cavity. It's pretty cool. Nasals, those ones are pretty easy and obvious, right behind the external nares, these big ones right on the top of the skull. Then behind them, this is kind of damaged, but this pair of bones would be frontals, okay, and behind them, this pair of bones, parietals, okay, so nasals, frontals, parietals. That's pretty nice. Occipital bone at the back of the skull then, so this whole thing, back of the skull, is occipital bone, interparietal bone. Oh. Yeah. It's a little bit hard to see, but often there's, can you see it on there? Mm-hmm. Oh. Not my. Oh my God, wow.
Isn't that it?
This is actually not.
Oh, that's the occipital.
That's just the occipital, but thanks. But where you'll see it on these guys, and it's just a little bit hard to see, is right up into here. Do you see there's a little bone kind of wedged in here, like a triangle kind of at the back, and you can see a suture here, down here. Wow. Interparietal. Ethmoid. Okay, the ethmoid is a tough one. Did you guys have trouble with ethmoids? So the thing with the ethmoid is that it's actually an enormous bone, but very little of it actually shows up on the outside of the skull. And it varies a lot on individual skulls, whether you can see it at all. If you do, and I'm not actually seeing it on either of these at all on this. Do you want to grab me a cat skull for a second? Because it usually shows up better on a cat skull.
Should rest caudal to the lacrimal and above the palatine?
Yes, exactly. So, it just kind of peeks through.
The sagittal section or the full?
Just one that actually has one showing. It's not your fault. They can just be a little bit tricky There we go. Okay. So do you see this little funny patch right there? That is a little bit of the ethmoid showing through right there. This little tiny area right here. Do you see that? Right in there. But the ethmoid itself is actually a really big bone. It's just very little of it can be seen from the outside of the skull. Easy place to see the ethmoid is if you just look in the external nares and you see these big scrolls of bones. That's all part of the ethmoid. Okay. And there's actually also a vertical plate of bone that drops down from above. Do you see that? That's called the perpendicular plate of the ethmoid. Okay, so they're right down there. So on a sagittal, what you can see very clearly is this bone here. This is the ethmoid, and it's this big bone that lies right in the middle of the nasal region of the skull. So all of this. Okay, is that good? Okay. Would that be endochondral or dermal? Endochondral, yeah. So that's basically the front end of the chondrocranium ossifying. Basis sphenoid, my favorite. Another one of my favorites, anyway. Lots of favorites. So the basis sphenoid is the bone that lies in front of the basioccipital. So not actually as clear as I'd like. It shows up better on this skull. So let's look here, where you can actually see. So this is the occipital here, and then this is our basioccipital region of the occipital. This is the basis sphenoid here behind. So this bone in here. Okay. And the basis sphenoid has it's actually disarticulated on this one. It has a wing that extends up along the side of the skull. So if you look kind of in this region here, there's an extension of bone up to form the sidewall of the skull, and this is called the atlas sphenoid, the wing of the sphenoid. And this is a dog, so it has a canal in the atlas sphenoid called the atlas sphenoid canal. Any of you who took mammalogy will know about this. Right there. Whereas a cat in that same region does not have an atlas sphenoid canal. And these ones, they're really hard to see the sutures on these. They're beautiful skulls. Oh no, there you can see the suture. So this is the atlas sphenoid here of the sphenoid, but there's no atlas sphenoid canal. So this guy in here. Okay. And then the other part of the basis sphenoid is the pterygoid. So here's basis sphenoid, there's the pterygoid, and it's actually fused on, although in this it's starting to fall apart and it's actually become separate. But that's the pterygoid there, basis sphenoid. Okay. The presphenoid sits in front of the basis sphenoid, and it's this bone, see it better on here. It's this one that lies right in the midline, right in here. That's the presphenoid. This guy. Okay. And in front of the presphenoid is this bone, and that's the vomer. The vomer is a dermal bone of the palate, whereas the presphenoid is an endochondral bone, part of the chondrocranium. Okay. Last but not least, the palatine bones. So what are these bones here at the front of the roof of the mouth? What would those be?
Maxilla.
Maxilla. I would